afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for another episode of Condo Insider. My name is Jane Sugimura, and I'm your host for this program. And we've got a really timely and interesting topic today. And my guest today is Executive Director for the Mediation Center of the Pacific, Tracey Wiltgen. Hi, Tracey.
Hi, Jane. Nice to see you.
Thank you for joining us for this program today.
Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Okay, and one of the reasons, and I think I talked to you about this, is, with this pandemic that's going on, we've had so many people, especially in the tour, since we're like a one engine economy, right? We've got tourism, and there's this entire industry that's practically shut down because of the pandemic. And how that affects condos is we have in most buildings, at least half of the units owned by investor owners. So that means they have tenants. And now the tenants don't have any jobs and they're not able to pay, their rent. But yet their owners have to pay maintenance fees. So that's why, we're talking to you today, because the Mediation Center of the Pacific, has a program that addresses these landlord-tenant issues, right?
Absolutely.
But before we get to that, let me just get some background on you. First of all, you're the Executive Director of the Mediation Center of the Pacific. Tell us what you do.
So as the Executive Director of the Mediation Center of the Pacific, I oversee operations. We serve approximately 7,000 people a year through mediation, dispute resolution, and training programs. We help people resolve conflict in a broad variety of areas. So condominium disputes between boards and owners, landlord-tenant disputes, which we'll talk more about, a lot of domestics, so a lot of divorcing couples, unmarried couples with children who need to work out time-sharing plans, workplace disputes, civil rights disputes, special education disputes, and consumer merchant disputes. So we help everybody with all kinds of disputes. And we've been in existence for 41 years, so we've been around a long time.
And what do you charge for your services if people want to come and have something mediated?
So for our general services, we charge on a sliding fee scale according to household income. So we want to make sure that we're accessible and affordable to everybody. So for example, if you're in a workplace dispute and you want to access mediation and you come on your own, each person would pay a flat fee according to their household income. So it's a very modest fee for a 3-hour mediation session. I do want to point out when we're talking about the landlord-tenant mediation program, that program is free to both landlord and tenant.
Okay, and in your organization, how many mediators do you have?
So we're very fortunate. We have a cadre of about 125 mediators, and they come from a broad variety of backgrounds. Some of them are attorneys, some of them are business people, some of them are real estate professionals, and they all go through a lot of training in mediation to be able to mediate. And each mediator goes through basic and advanced mediation training. They go through an apprenticeship. Once they complete all that and they're certified by us as a mediator, then they take specialized training to be able to mediate in specialized arenas, such as the condominium arena or workplace or divorce. So they do a lot of training and we do a lot of continuing education. And what's really important is our mediators are volunteering their time.
Well, one thing too, for somebody who's never done mediation, explain to the listener, what is mediation?
I'd be happy to. So in mediation is a process and it's an art. What happens is when people are in conflict, they generally don't listen to each other. Everybody becomes very wedded in their own perspectives. Through the mediation process, we schedule it at a day and time that works for the parties. And generally we will assign 2 mediators. Sometimes we assign 1, but we have the luxury of assigning 2 since they're volunteering their time and you're not paying by the hour for the mediator. So the 2 mediators, we will sit down with the parties. Generally, they will have an opening session with both parties together to hear what the issues are. And then they meet privately, and it can go back and forth working in private sessions with the parties to hear what their view of the situation is, how they would like to resolve it. So the mediators do a lot of listening, and then they start sharing information to help both people understand where the other person's coming from. And then they help them negotiate agreements. If they're able to reach an agreement, the mediator will put that agreement in writing so that each party has a memorialized agreement and they know what they agreed to. So it's a very informal process. The idea is to feel safe and secure sharing information because it's confidential. And by that, I mean, the mediator doesn't go out and talk about what they've heard. And if you did end up in court, let's say it doesn't get resolved and you did end up in court, you can't share with the judge what those discussions were in mediation. So if somebody offered to do something and then they didn't agree, the other party can't say to the judge in court, in the mediation, she was willing to do this, now I want it. Those discussions are off the table. So it gives people the confidence. They can brainstorm ideas, they can bounce ideas off the mediator, off of each other, and they don't feel they're going to get stuck with it. So the key with mediation, the parties make the decision. The mediator doesn't tell you what to do. And I think for me, that's the real power of the process is you can walk away and say, you know, I don't think that there's an agreement that I'm comfortable with, or you can say, this is what I want, and the two parties work through the issues and craft the agreement that works for both of them.
Okay, now let's talk about this rapid response landlord-tenant mediation. That's, you know, that's what we're here talking about. What exactly does that do? What is that program supposed to do?
So in response to COVID, as you were mentioning, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, many businesses have closed down. The hotel industry is closed down. So people are without jobs, which financially impacts tenants who then are unable to pay their landlords, which financially impacts the landlords. So in response to this need, we created the Rapid Response Landlord Tenant Mediation Program. Through the program, we bring landlords and tenants together to work out payment plans so that the landlord is getting at least something for the rent, and the tenant can feel assured or be assured by the landlord that they're not going to be evicted when the moratorium is lifted. As you know, there's been a moratorium on eviction. So even if a tenant isn't paying, and that doesn't mean the tenant isn't supposed to pay, but even if the tenant isn't paying, the landlord cannot evict the tenant. Oftentimes, what tenants and landlords don't know is there are rental assistance programs out there. So if a tenant comes to us to mediate with their landlord because they're not comfortable reaching out and having that conversation on their own, the first thing we ask them is, have they accessed the rental assistance programs? And if they haven't, we encourage them to go to the rental assistance program to see if they qualify, because that's going to help them in negotiations with their landlord. So basically, through the mediation process, a landlord and a tenant who's been financially impacted by COVID can work out payment plans, which gives the landlord some financial compensation, or not compensation, it gives them some of the rent that's owed, if not all of it, and enables the tenant to stay there and not dig a deeper financial hole, which would result in them being evicted when the moratorium is lifted.
You were talking about these rental assistance programs, and I know we talked earlier. There's one by this. There's one program that's being run by the city, and
Correct.
One that's being run by the state. Talk about the city program.
Okay, so the city program is in place right now. So currently on Oahu, our city has approximately $25 million for rental assistance. Also, well, I'll talk about what else it can cover. This program is being run through Aloha United Way. And so a tenant can contact Aloha United Way. So either they can call 211 and tell whoever answers the phone that they want information on the rental assistance program, or they can go directly to Aloha United Way's website. If they Google rental assistance Aloha United Way, it'll take them to the website page where they can actually click on and start filling out the information that's needed for them to apply for the rental assistance. Now, it's important to know for this program, there is rental assistance for both back rent, because many tenants owe back rent from mid-March when everyone was told to shelter in place through currently. There's also funds for paying rent moving forward. And we can talk more about that as we continue this conversation. So what happens is the tenant needs to show that they have been financially impacted by COVID. They were laid off, they were furloughed, they lost their job. So that's critical. If they've been collecting unemployment insurance, it's important for them to show the unemployment insurance they've collected. Now, important criteria for a tenant to be eligible is they have to be making less now than at the time they lost their job or were furloughed. So, and what I mean by this is some tenants, when they lost their job or when they were furloughed and they started collecting unemployment, through the unemployment payments, they were making more than what they had made at their job. So if that's the case, they won't qualify for the rental assistance. So that's important. But if they're making less, and a lot of people are making less, and they have less than $15,000, so liquid assets, then they can apply for this back rent. Also, they have funds to cover utility, and the city also has funds for rent moving forward. So from August through December, it can be up to $2,000 of rent moving forward. So it's really an opportunity for a tenant to see what they qualify for. And then once they qualify, to meet with the landlord through mediation and work out a plan of what those payments are going to look like. And then also based on that, a commitment on part of the landlord that they will not evict the tenant when the moratorium is lifted, and that the tenant will seek financial counseling so that they have a plan for the future. So that's kind of a global picture of what can happen by accessing this rental assistance program.
And that's the city program, right?
That's the city program, exactly.
And with the city program, are the payments made directly to the tenant, or are they made to the landlord for the rent?
So the rent payments will go directly to the landlord.
Under the city program?
Correct.
Okay, so that gives the landlord assurance, if it participates in this mediation, that it'll get paid, right? In fact, that they would probably want the tenant to apply for these rental assistance programs so that they can be assured that it would be paid.
Exactly. It's a benefit to both the landlord and the tenant. Landlords don't want to evict tenants, particularly a tenant that through no fault of their own lost their job because of the pandemic and was unable to pay the rent. So this gives the tenant the ability to pay the landlord the back rent if they qualify, and also rent moving forward. It gives the landlord the ability to have a stable tenant and the ability to pay their mortgage and their own bills that I'm sure they need to pay with the rental income they were anticipating.
And you know, with this program, this landlord tenant mediation, let's say that the tenant is afraid to talk to their landlord. Can the tenant contact the Mediation Center of the Pacific, and will the center then communicate with the landlord for the tenant?
Absolutely. So that's the way the process works. So either a landlord or tenant can contact us. Generally, it's the tenant that contacts us, and whoever contacts us needs to provide us with the contact information of the other party. So if the tenant contacts us, they provide us with the name and contact information of the landlord. We'll reach out to the landlord. We'll explain to the landlord who we are, how mediation works. We'll let them know either that we encourage the tenant to go seek rental assistance, or if the tenant has already done so and qualified, we'll let the landlord know that. We'll find out from the landlord whether they're willing to mediate and a day and time that they're available to do so.
Okay, well, we're right up to our break. So why don't we take the 1 minute break and we'll come back and we'll talk about the state
Great.
program.
Sounds
Okay?
great. Thanks,
Okay,
Jane.
thank you.
Aloha, I'm Lillian Cumey, host of Lillian's Vegan World, the show where we talk about veganism and the plant-based diet, located in Honolulu, Hawaii. I'm a vegan chef and cooking instructor, and I have lots of information to share with you about how awesome this plant-based diet is. So do tune in every second Thursday from 1 p.m. Aloha.
Welcome back to Condo Insider. And our guest today is Tracey Wiltgen from the Mediation Center of the Pacific. And we're talking about landlord-tenant mediation that will help landlords recover their rent, and tenants can figure out a way to pay their rent and avoid eviction, which is a win-win situation if it works. And thank you, Tracey, for being with us.
Thank you.
We did get a viewer question about are these mediations conducted by Zoom or phone or in person? And I guess that goes along with one of the questions I was going to ask anyway. Because of government mandates for social distancing, how do you conduct your mediations?
That's a great question. And actually, the answer is yes to all of those things. So we want to make mediation accessible for everyone. We do have very limited in-person mediation. We're fortunate our building at 1301 Young Street, which we just purchased a few months ago, is spacious enough that allows us to social distance and have very limited mediations. And by that, I mean, we only conduct one mediation at a time, and each person and the mediators are all in separate rooms. So, because some people are still more comfortable mediating in person. But the preponderance of our cases being mediated today, in light of social distancing, are via video conference. We also have telephone mediations, and we also have an online program. So let me talk about the video conference mediations, which are via Zoom. And I know some people had some concerns about Zoom, but we have been working with Zoom since the start of COVID and have had a lot of success. It's a easy platform. It's a safe platform. We have all the securities in place. The key is that each party needs to have the ability to participate via desktop, laptop, smartphone, or an iPad or other tablet that has video as well as microphone capabilities. So if you have that, it's a great platform. And when we're using Zoom now, the nice thing in a mediation via Zoom, we also can move people into breakout rooms, just like an in-person mediation. So we're working with you privately as well as together. If you're comfortable being together, it's still confidential. Everything is electronic, so you sign the confidentiality agreement via DocuSign. If there's an agreement at the end of the mediation, the mediators will help memorialize that agreement, and you can use a shared screen so everybody's giving input. And then it's directly emailed to each party for them to review and to sign via DocuSign. You can do it from your home, you can do it from your office. We ask that you have a private place so that you don't have people walking back and forth and listening in. So it works well, and majority of our cases are being conducted via Zoom. As I mentioned, we also have an online platform which really lends itself to these landlord-tenant mediations, since the focus is working out a payment plan and an agreement. With online mediation, you click on a link, it takes you to a secured portal. So it's like doing email, but you're in a secured portal. So you can't, nobody else has access to those emails. And you're working with a mediator. And again, the mediator can email back and forth, chat back and forth via this platform with both parties together or with them separately. And the beauty of this program is that everything is built within the program. So the confidentiality agreement, it's signed directly through the program. And if there is an agreement at the end, it's signed directly through the program and is immediately available to both parties. The other thing that's great about this program is you do it when you're available. So you don't have to schedule a day and time for a mediation. You click on the link, you say, I'd like to mediate this case via online. The other party is contacted. If they respond, a mediator is assigned. The mediator will be typing in, and then let's say you're at work, so you don't want to respond, but at 6 o'clock that night, you're home and you go, I'm relaxed, now I want to respond. And so there's back and forth. It could be simultaneously if both parties are on at the same time, but there could be a lag in between. And we do keep a time constraint on it. So it's not like you're not going to hear from somebody for 48 hours. So it really is a convenient way to participate in a mediation process that's focused on essentially working out a payment plan.
And I have another question here. Does this program apply to commercial landlord-tenant?
It could, absolutely, yeah.
And are there rental assistance programs that you're aware of for commercial tenants?
I am not aware of any programs for commercial tenants. I know that tenants are asking for that, and I'm not aware of any programs available right now. And that doesn't mean there aren't any. There may be something out there that I'm not aware of. I've been focused on the residential programs.
Okay, one other question. We were going to talk about the state program. And,
Yeah.
and you gave me some news just before the show started that they reached some kind of an agreement today, right? To implement the state program.
Yeah, so the governor signed the bill last Friday. There's $50 million available through the CARES funds for rental assistance, and this is statewide. And so the Aloha United Way and Catholic Charities have been contracted to subcontract with other organizations to help qualify tenants and disperse the funds to the landlord. So Aloha United Way is focused primarily on Oahu. They're working directly with credit unions and also some of the health centers such as Waianae Comprehensive, Waimanalo Health Center. And so what this means is that the tenants can go directly to these credit unions or health centers to fill out the paperwork. They'll also have an online process that they'll be able to access. Now with this state program, the tenants, there's no back rent right now. It's all about rent moving forward. So from August through December, if the tenant qualifies. Again, the only tenants who will qualify are tenants who've been financially impacted by COVID. So they lost their job, maybe they had 2 jobs. I've heard of people having 2 or 3 jobs and they lost 1 or 2 of them. So they've been financially impacted and are unable to pay part of their rent or all of their rent. So there's no back rent in the state program, but if they qualify, it will be rent moving forward. It'll be $2,000 a month on Oahu and $1,500 a month on the neighbor islands. So if a tenant qualifies, the landlord will get 3 months of rent moving forward. So August, September, October. The tenant then will need to go back to requalify for November and December. But unless something changes and the tenant suddenly maybe has a job and is making more money, when they go back, they'll requalify, and then the landlord will get the last 2 months of rent moving forward.
And in these payments, are they made to the tenant or to the landlord?
Those payments are made to the landlord. And so what landlords and tenants should be thinking about right now is, well, first of all, tenants should be going to the city to see if they qualify for the city funds. The state program is just rolling out. I think that they will be ready probably by next week. So tenants can't start going for those funds yet. But as soon as they are available, tenants should be applying for the funds to see if they qualify. And if yes, then participating in a mediation process with the landlord.
And if they don't know where to go, they can contact the Mediation Center and find out where they should go and apply. Isn't that true?
Yes, so we're telling tenants where they can go and apply. And also they can go on Aloha United Way's website. Aloha United Way is providing all the information about where tenants can apply, and they also have an online application. So that's important.
And these payments that go that are being given to the landlord through these programs, are they loans or are they grants?
So it's more like a grant. The tenant is not required to pay it back.
Okay, so this is a good thing.
It's a great thing. Yes, it'll help that tenant. It'll give the tenant some relief and that they don't have to worry that they're going to be evicted. And it definitely gives the landlord some relief because now they have payments coming in. They're assured of the payments because it's coming directly to them. And they know they don't have to be going to court to evict their tenant and start the process of finding a new tenant all over again.
And one thing, I mean, the reason I found out about this program is you and I are on a task force with the judiciary, and the judiciary has been anticipating that when the governor's mandate expires, that there's going to be this flood of cases that's going to tie up the district courts. And that's why the district courts reached out to entities like Legal Aid and to your organization to find out what's out there in the community that's going to help these people deal with these issues, because the judges did warn us, right? Once it gets to court, all they do is adjudicate. And so they're not there to mediate. They're not there to try to find a solution. If the tenant comes in, hasn't paid the rent, they're going to issue writs. And so because of the anticipation of what could happen when the mandate ends, I mean, that's why we're all together trying to come up with solutions and provide resources, because this way the courts are going to say, hey, you should go to the Mediation Center of the Pacific or Legal Aid or whatnot, because if you don't resolve it, we're going to go to court, and it's not going to take long, and it's not going to be pretty.
Yeah, exactly, Jane. It's a huge concern. The epidemic, the pandemic has created stress and hardship for everyone in a broad variety of ways, but not being able to pay your rent and not knowing what's going to happen in the future and that you possibly are going to be evicted has to be overwhelming for people. And so a lot of people weren't even aware that there were rental assistance programs. So it's really important to get this word out. And certainly landlords don't want to be in the position of evicting their tenants, but they also need to be having income coming in. So getting this word out about getting access to these programs early, getting there now. Some tenants thought they didn't have to pay any rent because of the moratorium. And in fact, they were still required to pay their rent. So being able to get rental assistance through the city, both back rent and rent moving forward, or through the state rent moving forward, is going to make a huge difference on their life situation. And then after that, then getting some financial counseling, which is available so that they can start planning for their future. It's been very difficult. So to have resources and to have a plan in place to look forward, I think is going to make a huge difference. But people should start accessing it now.
Yes, and we've run out of time, unfortunately. And thank you, Tracey, for being with us and telling us about this really important and timely program. And we hope that people are going to listen to this program and start contacting the center so that they can avoid this situation when the governor's mandate expires, and then it will really be a problem. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Okay, and thank you, the listeners, for joining us for another episode of Condo Insider. And please tune in next week for another interesting episode about condo living and for people who live and work in condos. Thank you.